Welcome back to the channels. My name is Thomas Fletcher and I'm the host of both the LCSW Network and the Military Social Work Network. If you're new to both of my channels, please do me a favor by smashing that like button, by subscribing to the channels, and by sharing this video with your social work colleagues and friends. The purpose of both of these channels is to create a community of hope and support where social workers can come for relevant news, information, and inspiration. Welcome back to part 3 of our Ask a Military Social Work mini-series titled, What Do Uniformed Social Workers Actually Do in the Reserve Component of the U.S. Army? So if you are new to both of my channels, I am a military social worker, both civilian. I have over 21 years as a military social worker in the Department of Veterans Affairs, and I have over 13 years as a uniform military social worker in the reserve component of the U.S. Army. Approximately, I served 11 years in the California National Guard, and I've served over the past 2 years in the U.S. Army Reserves as a 73 Alpha social work officer. So, this is part 3. In part 1, we talked about the primary job or role that you can expect to play as a social worker in the reserve component of the U.S. Army is behavioral health officer, right? In part 2, we covered a different role, unit prevention leader or unit deterrence leader. In this episode, we're going to be covering the broad category of leadership, different leadership roles that you could play as a social worker in either the Army National Guard or the U.S. Army Reserves. So over the past almost 14 years that I've served in the reserve component, I have seen social workers in various leadership roles within, again, both the National Guard and the U.S. Army Reserve. We can start with the highest leadership role that you could expect to perform or play if you wanted to in the U.S. Army Reserve component of the U.S. Army, and that would be a commander of a unit, like company commander, battalion commander, brigade commander. You could even go as far as division commander if you really wanted to. But I have served, this is not just theory, right? So I've actually served in different units. In the National Guard, we had one of our company commanders when I served in the medical detachment of the California National Guard was a 73 Alpha, and meaning he was a social worker, and actually he was both the director of behavioral health for the California National Guard. As a matter of fact, he was like a founding, he was a founding clinician, founding father of the behavioral health division of the California Military Department. So he was both state active duty director, and then on the M-Day side, on the reserve component side, he did serve for 2 or 3 years as a company commander of one of our medical detachments, right? And I've also worked with social workers. I've also served with, again, uniformed military social workers that have also served as company commanders. It's a lot of responsibility, obviously, being any type of commander. It's going to entail a lot of responsibility, but the opportunities are there for you as a social worker if you want to spread your wings beyond being a behavioral health officer. And within there's other leadership opportunities that you could pursue potentially as a 73 Alpha social worker. Some other examples of leadership positions that you could pursue are a platoon leader. So you could be a platoon leader in your unit. Yeah, right now I'm in a unit where we have about 2 or 3 social workers serving as platoon leaders, and I have served as platoon leader in the past, primarily in the National Guard, but on occasion I am called to be an acting platoon leader when the regular platoon leader is on leave. So I've done that, and that's basically taking responsibility for let's say 20 to 30 soldiers, right? And within a platoon you might have 4 or 5 squads, usually 4 squads. And you'll have squad leaders that will report to you, in terms of taking accountability for who's in battle assembly, who's absent. And obviously if you deploy as a platoon leader, you're going to be responsible for those troops during the deployment, right? Another type of leadership position that I've seen social workers as well as psychologists play is one of officer in charge, or OIC. And you can be an OIC for various levels of responsibility. When I deployed, well, this is not a good example for social work, but it could apply. When I did deploy, one of our OICs for our behavioral health section happened to be a psychologist. But on occasion, when he was traveling downrange, one of our social workers was the acting OIC. And then there's I just came back from annual training, and there's various levels of OIC. We had an OIC for the general 2-week annual training, which happened to be a social worker. And I happen to serve as an OIC for running one of the ranges for individual weapons qual, right? And that's, when you're running a range, that's a lot of responsibility. It's making sure that all of the SOPs for the range are being followed, making sure that that you have all the correct personnel available. You need a medic or a CLS person available in case somebody gets injured. You have to make sure that the ammo detail is following their SOP. Fire safety. There's a lot of responsibilities, when you are a range OIC. And that's true for, various different OIC positions. There's another position that I see being fulfilled by social worker in my current Army Reserve unit, and that's OIC for lodging in kind. So if you join the U.S. Army Reserve, whether you're a social worker or any other position, if you live more than 50 miles away from your armory, you are entitled to at least, and this is generally for battle assembly, weekends, right? You're entitled to at least 1 night of lodging at the Army's expense. And if you live, if you live over 100 miles away, it might be more than that, but then you're entitled to up to 2 nights of lodging in kind. And that might sound like a low responsibility job, but it's actually a very important position to make sure that the soldiers that are traveling 50, 100, 200, whatever, 500 miles, that there is a room available for them. And so the OIC for lodging in kind has to, maintain communications with the hotel, whichever hotel is maintaining the the LIK contract to make sure. So it's maintaining contact with the hotel, it's maintaining contact with the soldiers to make sure to pre-plan for, you know, next month's battle assembly, that you have that our unit has allocated enough hotel rooms for those traveling service members, right? So that's a big responsibility, actually. It's no small matter to be able to house service members when they're on battle assembly weekends. So these are just some examples of another example that comes to mind. XO. You have commander. That's the person that's ultimately in charge of a unit, and right below the commander is the executive officer, and the executive officer is delegated certain tasks by the commander, and that's again a very important responsibility that again a social worker could fill that position within the reserve component. Okay, and there's other examples, but I just want to open your minds that if you're a social worker, if you're a 73 Alpha in the reserve component, there are a lot of opportunities beyond the standard behavioral health role, which is the primary role of a social worker in the military. But again, we're talking about reserve component. And one of the things that's important for all of you to be aware of, especially if you're thinking about joining the reserve component as a social worker, it is important that as social workers, not only are we doing, you know, our primary role, but that we have some collateral duties. And why do I say that's important? Because at the end of each year, we have to be able to account for our time with regards to our OERs. That's Officer Evaluation Ratings, right? So the more things that you're doing beyond just, you know, and that sounds a little weird, I know. Normally you get rated for your primary job, but again, as reservists, we may not be doing our behavioral health officer role a lot during inactive duty training. In part 1, I did discuss, as behavioral health officers, as social workers, we do a lot of trainings. We, you know, during inactive duty weekends, we do provide trainings, we provide mentoring, supervision for our behavioral health technicians, right? But again, it's also important that we're doing these other tasks, including performing leadership roles. So I hope that was helpful. I would invite you all to leave comments, especially those of you that are more experienced. I'd love to hear what type of leadership experiences some of you have had in the past as social workers or other, you know, mental health positions, whether you're a clinical psychologist, occupational therapist, nurse practitioner, psychiatrist. I would love to hear what other type of leadership experiences you've played in reserve component of the U.S. Army. So I'm going to stop right there, but I want to thank you all for watching this video. For all the social workers and other licensed mental health professionals, thank you for the work that you do every day, for your clients, for your agency, and for the profession. Please continue to support each other and yourselves. Bye for now.